Hello again and welcome to another episode of Back of the Net and Beyond. And today I'm going to be speaking to Rachel Boardman, who is a former swimmer. How you doing, Rachel? You okay?
Yeah, I'm great, thanks. It's nice and warm here today, so that's always a bonus.
Yeah, same here. Just trying to make the most of the sun, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Especially when you can't go out too far and all that. So.
Exactly. Thanks for joining me today. Obviously, really appreciate it. If you want to just talk to us about just give us an brief insight in terms of kind of who you are and what you do at the moment.
Yeah, so I am, like you said, I'm a former swimmer. I have a PhD, but that's in preclinical oncology, and I'm sure we'll get to how that happened. But I don't really do anything to do with that anymore. I have my own podcast. It's called Beyond the Finish Line, and speaks a little bit along your kind of messages. It's about the transition period out as people leave sport and how they like the challenges they face and along those lines, and looking at the entrepreneurship side of athletes leaving sport. And I also do a little bit of coaching, helping those former athletes build their businesses, and whether that's coaching or through building out like sales funnels and that kind of thing, because I'm a bit of a digital marketing geek, to be honest.
Right. Oh, good. I mean, that sounds like you're doing a lot of stuff and obviously a lot of good work there. And obviously, I want you to elaborate on that a bit further down the line. But if we kind of start at the beginning, kind of you as a youngster growing up, kind of were you always involved in swimming from as far back as you can remember, or was it something that you just kind of stumbled upon?
Yeah, so I think with the thing with swimming is obviously it's a life skill, and it's something that most people learn when they're young. I know not everyone does, but a lot of people do, whether that's through school or through their parents. And basically my parents, they wanted me, so when they went on holiday, they didn't want to have to worry about me drowning in the pool. They wanted to be able to relax because they're on holiday. So they put both me and my brother, I've got a younger brother, they put us through swimming lessons. What they didn't bank on was the fact that I would absolutely love swimming, and that's the sport that I fell in love with. Like, don't get me wrong, I tried a bunch of different sports. Like, I did gymnastics, I did like football or soccer, whichever way you want to put it. I did tag rugby at school, netball. I did like a bunch of different sports. But swimming was always the one for me. And I remember I got to like the end of like the swimming lessons, like, and the teacher kind of said to my mum, "You're like, well, that's it now. We can't take her any further. That's it." So, and I just turned around to him and went, "But I want to swim." Like, so luckily they were friends with a lady called Joyce Turner, who ended up becoming my first coach, and she did swimming lessons and coached for what ended up being my local swimming club. And so she got me in there, sorted out some of my technique and whatever, and then I ended up just went into the club and moved up through the stages, and I went from swimming half an hour for once a week during lessons to swimming 20 hours in the pool a week plus 5-6 hours in the gym type thing at the end.
I mean, growing up I've come across obviously various different sports people, and I know how intense football training can be, but in comparison to a lot of other sports, especially kind of swimming, athletics, boxing, it's nothing. I mean, swimming, from what I can remember, there was a girl in one of my schools that I went to, and she used to go swimming before school and then after school as well. So was that kind of similar to yourself?
Yeah. Up from about the age of 12, I started doing mornings. Like, it was only one morning a week to begin with, but I think it was like 2 or 3 in the end, where I'd be in the pool at 5:15, with everybody else. And then you'd go to school, and then after school you'd have more training. Like, literally, I have no idea how I fit in like schoolwork and homework, and like somehow I did all this training. I didn't know any difference, I guess. So I just kind of did it.
Used to it. It was the norm.
Yeah. I know my mum always had this thing where if I didn't do my homework or I wasn't keeping up at school, then I couldn't go training. But like, that wasn't a thing for me. I was like, I want to swim, like, so I'm gonna get this done.
Jesus, that's a crazy amount of hours that you must have put in there. I don't know. I mean, as a teenager or kids in general, it's normally quite hard to get them out of bed. For me, sometimes it's quite hard to get out of bed and obviously get to school on time. So imagine having to wake up knowing that you're going to be training, and it's going to be physical training as well, and then have to go to school and concentrate.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, like the winter months were the hardest, where you got up and then so, well, when I was younger, I let my mum or dad, whoever's taking me, scrape the ice off the car. But like once I learned to drive, like literally they paid for my driving lessons so that I could take myself to morning training.
Fine, yeah.
No word of a lie.
That's clever though.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So then I'd have to scrape the ice off the car in the winter. But like it was always a case of, if I wanted to go and train, I had to get myself out of bed. They were never going to get me out of bed. It had to be me that wanted to do it. They were never, I was quite lucky. They never pushed me to do anything that I didn't want to do.
Yeah. So in a way, you mentioned that obviously it was down to you. It's your responsibility to get yourself out of bed, obviously motivate yourself. So that put you in good stead, I'm assuming, going forward for the latter stages of kind of your career, or as you're getting older, things that you may come across. Because not most kids at that age are putting themselves through kind of, not that burden, but through that situation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why I never really bonded that well with my friends at school. Like I have friends, obviously I have friends at school and whatever, and we hung out while at school, but never outside of school. Like my teammates on the swimming team, they were my second family. Almost, because you used to spend so much time with them, and they got what everything and that kind of thing. So that was probably why that kind of thing happened. But yeah, I think I just, in my head from a very, very early age, like, I think I can't remember where it was, but I just have this memory of watching like I think it was the Olympic trials or something, like watching that on TV and being like, I want that, like I want to go. And then in I think 2002, we had, because I'm from Manchester, we had the Commonwealth Games here in Manchester. And my mum got me tickets. I went with my mum to go and watch the swimming at the Commonwealth Games pool, and that was just like, yes, I want to. And the big thing for me was, so I told you, I mentioned a lady called Joyce Turner earlier, my first coach. Well, her son, he was swimming at the games, so like I kind of knew someone who's there, and he went on to swim at the Athens Olympics as well. So it was kind of like knowing someone, like I knew someone that had got there.
So you could relate to it.
Yeah, so I knew that it was possible, and so that was always that dream, and I knew that if I had to get there, then I had to do the training, I had to put the work in, and that kind of thing. Obviously that didn't work out, but
nah, but still, I mean, it's not always easy to obviously get to the top. There's a lot of kind of pitfalls, people that you come across. Massive part of it is luck as well, as with anything in life. At what point then was it for you where you thought, okay, well, I can maybe make a career out of this?
I think it's hard when it comes to swimming. There isn't, because it's up until like literally last year, it was a very amateur sport. Like unless you are an Olympian, a world champion or whatever, then you were never gonna make a, you know, like, unless you're like Michael Phelps, you're never gonna make a career out of swimming, because there isn't like a pro. Up until last year, when they introduced the International Swimming League, there wasn't a pro league or anything like that. So the only way that you could make money was from prize money and sponsorship. Apart from that, it was that was it. So unless you were at the top of the league, you were never really going to make money for it. And for that reason, that's why I always had the academic stuff along with it, because I knew that even if I got to the top, like I might not stay there, but you've got to have something. One, you've got to have something to fall back on in case you don't make it, and two, like as a swimmer, it's not like football or like even like rugby or like NFL or whatever. It's very or golf. It's very hard to make a career out of it. Whereas with the International Swimming League now, it's a little bit easier, but obviously you still have to be one of the top swimmers, because at the minute there's only 6-8 teams who've they've got 12 male and 12 female on each team, so it's only a small selection of swimmers.
Yeah, Jesus, that sounds aside from being intense, pretty tough as well, mentally. I mean, obviously, so you mentioned about knowing that you may need something to fall back on. Was that always your train of thought? So when you were kind of, say, in the middle of your career, or even at the start, were you kind of thinking about like things to fall back on, courses to take, or whatever else? Was that kind of your train of thought at that point?
Yeah, so I feel quite lucky in that not only was I decent like athletically, I had those talents, I also have the academic talents. So
Right. Okay.
I came out of school, like my lowest grade was a B, and that was in languages, and I'm not very good at languages. Everything
Yeah.
else was an A or an A star.
Okay.
And from an early age, like I'd been bracketed in like the gifted and talented like groups of in
Right.
school and whatever, so I'd been pushed in different directions, and I'd kind of been told from an early age that like basically my next step after school was going to be university or college for whatever, whether
Right.
it
Okay. Yeah.
so, and then I got pushed down the route of kind of put down my neck was, oh, you're good enough to go to Oxford or Cambridge, which for anyone who doesn't know, they're like the two most prestigious universities in England.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to go there because I think I'd had it shoved down my neck, and I wanted to do something that I was interested in, that I loved, and that to me was, it was sport and it was science. But by the time I got to the point that it was time to kind of choose my courses, I was starting to lose my love of sport, to be honest. So I kind of got, I was feeling a little bit burnt out, and I had a little bit of a bad breakup with swimming. So to kind of go over it briefly, like when I was 15, I had pneumonia twice.
Twice. Wow.
Yeah, and it kind of, I got scarring on my lungs, which was probably one of the main reasons why I never got to reach my potential. And like after that, it took me 3 years to get back to like doing best times. I mean, that was hard enough watching all my friends like just like go forward and make all this progress, and I was just like stood.
Yeah, they're kicking on and you're kind of stuck in a rut.
Yeah, but I kind of always had that, like, it never, my belief never wavered that I knew I was going to get back, and it was going to happen eventually, and then it did.
Right.
And then I had this really awesome season where like nothing could go wrong. You just everything was going right until like this final competition that I went to, that was the last chance I had to qualify for the national championships. And I went in and I swam, and I knew it was going to be close, just because as you got towards the end of that wall on that last length, it was just so hard work. And then when I looked up at the clock to see the time, obviously at that point you always you know the time that I have to get, it's like memorized and burnt into your brain type thing. And I'd missed the time by 6/100ths of a second.
Oh my God.
It's like less than a fingernail time, and I was just devastated.
Imagine.
Yeah, but I didn't give myself the time to process that, and that's one of the big mistakes that I made. And it's like some of the stuff that happened in the following year, I've only just started in the last couple of years really figured out that was the thing, and the process, and like properly processing it. So, but at that point, I then had that following year, I had to decide where I was going to uni, what course I was doing. I had all these exams. And then I spent the year training, just getting fit, getting ill, taking time out to get well again, and then just that kind of cycle. And it just got to the point where I was just like, nah, I'm done.
Wow.
And at the end of the season, I called time on it. I still kept in the sport, like I was teaching swimming and doing a little bit of coaching, but like the actual competing I was just done. And I stepped away from like all forms of sport and exercise for several years. I was just like, nah, I've done enough exercise for life.
Time to chill out. Yeah. So just to go back slightly, so you mentioned obviously when it came to that stage where you thought you've had enough, did you consult with family, friends, coaches, or was it just you solely on your own thinking, this is what I'm going to do and no one's going to stop me?
A little bit. Like I think my friends and family and coaches are kind of, they saw that I was not fun anymore. Like in training, I was just like, what's the point? This is rubbish. I stopped going to morning. That was the first thing that went, morning trainings. And like normally when you miss a couple of trainings, or people start like or ask you what you're doing, why are you missing training, just like that little guilt, like come on, you've got this, trying to like and they just didn't do that. And then like I sat down, I chat with my coach, and he just he knew that what this we had I think there was a few months left till the end of the season, and we just was like, well, let's just see what we're doing. And basically we kind of made a transition. Like I missed a few more sessions, but I was teaching instead, because it was kind of the teaching side of stuff happened at the same time as the training. So I kind of shifted over to that, and he was quite encouraging of that kind of process. And as for my parents, they were just like, they probably knew before I did, to be honest. And they were like, they always said when he was stop enjoying it, then that's fine. They've always been very supportive of as long as I'm doing what makes me happy, then they're okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the same as me, to be honest. I've always had a good kind of family network behind me, and they generally support me in kind of anything that I choose to do. When it came to my retirement, I mean, it was just a case of, look, I got offered a job, my first interview that I went to, and on the day that I got offered that job, I also got offered to go and train just to prove my fitness, and then be offered a contract in football. And I just thought, I can't turn down the opportunity of a job that I'm potentially going to have to do for the rest of my life, versus maybe going back into the football field again, because I knew that within a year, 2, 3 years after that, I still need to find a job anyway. And it's not easy to find a job, as you know, or as you probably heard, for sports people, because your CV generally is just sports based. So you have to sell yourself, your personality, and obviously transferable skills.
Yeah, exactly. I was actually one of the guests I had on my show. He was a punter for the NFL. And he said, like, when he finished, when he retired from sport, he was like, yeah, all I can do is like kick a pigskin. That's it. I was like,
yeah, it's crazy, and that's the mindset that I'm trying to eradicate, because people just think, okay, well, all I've known is kicking a ball or swimming or playing cricket or tennis, and it's like, but what have you come across that reflects your personality or enhances your personality during that period? Who have you met? Who have you conversed with? What pitfalls have you come across? How have you overcome those? There's different things aside from what you're born with and what's naturally in your psyche. Sport always brings other elements to your personality anyway, and sometimes you're so immersed in it that you don't realize that you've got those attributes.
Yeah, no, exactly, and I think that's something that I didn't play on as much. So while I finished and I went on and I ended up doing 8 years at university, honing all these, so I did like a 4-year undergraduate degree, and then I went on and did my PhD. And I didn't really play on the fact that this sport was this thing, and I didn't really understand those skills until like later on, when I was at the point where I was looking like, what do I actually want to do now? I've got all this education and these skills, and I had someone who was actually working with my mum, and he sat me down and we looked at like all the different parts of my life that I had. Like I had my swimming background, I had my science. I was for most of my life in part of the Scout Association, done lots of things with those, and we looked at all these different parts and was like, well, you learned this from here and this from that and that from that. And it wasn't until somebody else sat me down and said, look, this is what you've got going for you, that I was actually, okay, yeah, I'm not just a former swimmer, I'm not just someone with a PhD. I can do this and I can do that and I can do all these different things.
Of course. Yeah, sometimes it's good to get someone else's perspective on kind of what you can offer, because sometimes you don't realise, or you just don't want to talk about yourself in that way anyway. So I mean, that must have been a massive help for you. In terms of, so when you retired, what age was that when you like kind of thought, well, that's it, I have fully retired now? What age?
So it was just before my 19th, but it was like the summer that I turned 19 in my birthday, September, so like around there. So it was like I finished in the beginning of the summer, and then in the September I started university.
Jeez. Okay, so I mean, you didn't have much time in between then to kind of like rest on your laurels, if that makes sense.
No, not at all. But to be fair, that I'd spent most of that last season thinking about the whether or not that was the right decision for me. So it wasn't a decision I made rashly. It was one that was made over time.
So slowly, mentally, you were making that transition then. So obviously
Yeah, I think, yeah.
that put you in good stead then going forward. How did you find uni life? Obviously mixing with the other people, the other students that were there.
Um, I think at first it was a little bit challenging, but I think for me, because obviously when I'm training, I was training with people from lots of different ages. So I'd seen like the age group above me, they'd gone off to uni.
Right,
A lot of them had stayed pretty local, and as a swimmers, like the natural progression for your first job is to like lifeguard or swimming teach. So a lot of them were still knocking around the process, and um, I'd heard their regrets and things that they'd wished they had done when they first went to uni. And one of the big things was a lot of them didn't live out. Like I went to university, like my undergraduate degree was like 10 minutes down the road. And my parents were like, don't care where you're going to uni, you are living out. So I lived out in halls 10 minutes down the road.
right.
It was the best. I didn't want to do that. I didn't think I was ready, but it's probably one of the best things that my mum and dad did for me, that they made me do it. It made me grow up. It made me become more independent and get that confidence and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
But I also I threw myself into Freshers Week.
Okay.
I went and mixed with all the people that I was living with. We went out on nights out. I mixed with all the people in my course and those kind of things. And like, I'm quite an introverted person by nature, and it was really hard and difficult.
Yeah.
But it was the best thing that I did, because I made friends, and I very early on, and it helped shape the way that my kind of university career, at least at Salford, went to a degree. Whereas like my older swimming people, they didn't really do much on the freshers. They might have gone out once or twice or whatever, but they didn't have the same connections with people, because they weren't living in halls, or they weren't connecting with the course mates as well. So yeah, that's kind of one of the big things that I did.
Yeah, I think that's massive. Just touching on, obviously, you said how you integrate yourself within the different groups and different frameworks. It's similar to like when a sports person, I'll refer to football just because naturally that's what I used to do. So I draw on that experience. And it's like when you join a new club, a new football team, and you try and integrate yourself as seamless as possible. So if there's like a night out or a social event, or if there's something going on, you try and get involved just to obviously get people to understand yourself and what you're about, and obviously the same for you as well. So, and if you don't, or if they're asking you to do certain things, and maybe the first couple of times you don't want to do it, and then maybe the third time you do, but if you just kind of isolate yourself, and it can come across in a negative way, and that can have an adverse effect on how your teammates are kind of receive you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And to be honest, that's something that I kind of did when I went and did my PhD. So I moved a little bit further away. So I did my PhD in Nottingham. And it was the first time that I was properly away. I lived in these student accommodation, but the people in my flat I didn't see, so there was not that connection there. And then a PhD is more like a job than a course, at least here in the UK. So you spend a lot of time in the lab with your postdoc people and the researchers, and you don't really get to mix with many other students unless you go out there. And I didn't feel like I had the opportunity to do that. I mean, if I could have made the opportunity, like if I'd put myself out there a little bit, but at that point in like my post sporting journey, I was well on the way down the dark hole that was my depression, because of the things that I hadn't processed leaving sport. And so I kind of locked myself away because I didn't know anybody. It was easy to do it. It was just easier to like not go out. And eventually I got to the point where I just was like, I can't do this anymore. And I walked out of the lab. Like I looked around the lab and I was like, if I leave right now, nobody's going to know that I've left. Nobody's even going to care. Like this was my thought process. It wasn't true, but so I grabbed my things and I walked out. I got on a train home. I didn't tell anyone I was doing this until I was halfway home, because I didn't want anyone to talk me out of the process. Like, I'd phoned home like a couple of months earlier, like crying, because I just like, I can't do this anymore. It's not, and all these things. And I basically got talked out of taking that time off and come, you know, for my mental health and coming home. Whereas this time I knew that if I did that, I just needed to go home, and I did, and that was like the kickstart for me getting better. And one of the things that did help was that I find my way back into sport and into exercise. Like, I was suggested to go and do counselling and whatever, but I didn't. I find it difficult to talk about like my emotions and the way that I'm feeling and that kind of thing, and that's just something that is something that I'm constantly learning to be better at. And at that time, I felt like I couldn't do it. Like, if I just like started talking about it, then I'd break down in tears, and I just couldn't get the words out. But also because it's the best way of putting this, I guess. When I stopped swimming, I kept eating like a swimmer. But I wasn't doing any exercise, so I piled on I put on the weight, and I didn't like the way that I looked, and I was like, I suddenly, like, with everything that was happening, I was just like, I need to do something, and the only thing that I knew how to do was to do some kind of exercise. So I joined like a class, and I started doing stuff, and slowly like everything started to change. And it was just, I'd forgotten, because I guess I'd always done some kind of sport and exercise. It hadn't really clicked how important and how powerful like doing exercise or just doing something that you enjoy has on your mood. Like, even just like playing a song that you like has such a ridiculous impact on like your mood and how positive you're feeling. And just getting back and just attempting to run, because I hate running, you know, trying to do a press up, sit up, or whatever, in doing those things in a group situation as well. So I was getting that social contact, and how quickly my mindset started to change, my mood started to change. Don't get me wrong, it took me a few years until I was like back to like my normal self, if that's a thing. But that going back to what I knew and getting back in exercise, and now it's something that I implement every day. Like, even though I can't get to the gym now because of the whole coronavirus situation, like I make sure, like, and I don't really like working out at home. I don't know what it is. I think it's something in my head, and it's something that I probably need to deal with. But at the minute, I mean, just enjoying going on a walk every day, whether it's like 20 minutes, whether it's an hour or whatever, but it's some kind of exercise. So
I think that helps massively. I mean, in terms of my retirement, I retired then. I mean, I used to go to the gym quite a lot just because I like to keep physically fit and stuff. And I did quite a lot of weights. It wasn't necessarily cardio work, because I did most of that when we were actually training with the team.
Oh yeah, no, I'm the same. I prefer lifting weights to doing cardio work.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, 100%. So, but in terms of, I mean, when I retired when I was 31, I'm 39 now, just turned 39, and I don't do anything. I don't do any weights or anything like that. And that's mainly just because my body type, I don't necessarily have to in a physical way. So if I eat junk food or whatever, I don't necessarily put weight on. So I'm lucky like that, and I know a lot of people aren't that way inclined. And it's just one of those things. And I suppose that's probably why I think, well, I don't really want to do it. But in terms of when you said about music and things and maybe putting a song on, if I'm doing the washing up, because generally that's what I do in the house, I do washing up and whatever else. So if I'm doing the washing up, I prefer to have music on in the background, just because it allows me to just get through it a lot easier, rather than just doing it in silence. So it's amazing how those little things can kind of trigger certain senses within the psyche to obviously push you forward.
Yeah, no, exactly. And if you think about it, you see so many athletes, whether it's a team sport or an individual sport, before their game or their race or whatever it is, they're listening to some kind of music to get them in the right mindset. So it makes sense. It makes sense that would be a thing outside of sport as well, whether it's to put you in a positive mood or to, you know, get you in the mood to go and do that run or you know, work out or do you work or whatever it is.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. In terms of obviously you got a PhD, so you graduated through the university system. When you graduated, how did that feel for you? Was that kind of, how did it compare to maybe winning a race in swimming or something that you may have achieved in swimming?
I think it was probably on par, to be honest, because I've been through so much during that time, and there were times where I didn't think I'd finish it. There were times where I didn't want to finish it, and it was just it was such a it was just so much hard work and so different to what I thought it was going to be at the beginning, that I kind of so the last thing that I don't know what it's different because PhDs are different from institution to institution and whatever, but in the UK, like your final exam, you have what's called a viva, and it's basically an oral assessment where for me it was, I sat down with like I had two assessors. So I had an internal assessor, so they were from my university, and an outside assessor who like knew about the field that I was studying basically, but they were from a different institution. And they come in and they've read your work, and then they ask you questions and you have to defend what you're doing. And I was in there for 3 hours.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I don't know where the time went, but apparently like my PhD supervisor was just like pacing up and down. He was like, why are they in there so long, blah blah blah. And then like I passed and everything was great, and just it was, I guess I can only imagine it to when you like win, whether it's like, obviously I never won an Olympic gold medal, so I can't assess, but from what I've heard from people saying that kind of thing, like it doesn't sink in straight away. You're kind of in that like disbelief. And it took a little while for it to sink in. And then just I had my viva in like August time, but then obviously graduation wasn't until December, so I had that kind of time to kind of think about it. And then I went to graduation and I got to get dressed up in this really colourful robe that made me look like I was part of Hogwarts. No, not killing it. It's like this red colour, so I felt like I was in Gryffindor. It was awesome. And then you get to walk across the stage on your own, which is like, whereas like if just like your bachelors, you go up in groups because there's just so many of you, so that was quite nice. And it was just like, whereas I just celebrated the day and I made so much more of an effort, and it had so much more significance than my undergraduate.
Of course.
And I'm not, anyone that knows me will tell you that like I don't show a lot of emotion. Like I only show extreme, so you know when I'm really happy or really sad or really angry. Like apart from that, it's just like and it was something that I shared with people, I talked about, and it was something that achievement I was proud of, in the same way that I had made the when I won the county championships and I made the county team for the inter-county championships, and then I won my regionals and I made nationals and those kind of things. So it was on a par with those, I in a way, but there was a different feeling because I guess I'd been through more hardship, and I think I was just more aware of everything that had happened, whereas when I'd done those things I was a lot younger and I was just doing something that I loved and didn't really appreciate the significance of it. I just thought, oh yeah, this is just something I do and something that happens, as opposed to never really appreciated that not everybody gets to win a county championships, not everybody gets to go to the national championships and those kind of things.
Wow, that's massive. So what uni were you at, by the way?
So I did my undergraduate at University of Salford, and then I did my PhD at University of Nottingham.
Right, okay. Right, and then so in terms of nowadays, bringing things to kind of up to a point where we are now, what what are you actually doing now? Have you utilised your PhD, or have you moved on completely, or are you doing that as well as something else? Or what's your situation at the moment?
So I'm not using my PhD specifically.
Okay.
I'm not working in the labs and stuff. I mean, I could if I wanted to, but when I got to like halfway through my PhD, I was like, I just don't want to work in a lab anymore. I looked at jobs that use my skills that I'd learned, like the whole transferable skills situation. And I looked at going down the writing route because writing is something that I've always enjoyed.
Okay.
But I applied for jobs and whatever, but I didn't get any. And at that point, I was like, I decided to follow my gut instinct, and that's something that I've always done, like throughout like my life. Is my guts never led me wrong yet. And I decided I was going to go traveling.
All right.
So for most of the last 2 years, I've spent traveling Australia, and it's been one of the best experiences that I've ever had. It put me in those uncomfortable situations and made me do things that I would never do. Like I went and worked in a bar. I find out that I actually enjoy working behind a bar. I never thought that was going to be a thing. Who knew? So I worked in country pubs in the back end of nowhere. Like literally this one place that I worked in is a little town called Injune. There's 400 people that live in this town. Right. It's an hour away from the nearest town, and it's about a 7-hour drive from Brisbane.
Okay.
Inland. Yeah, it's like ridiculous. And I got to work another job that I did, which I'd never ever in a million years have been able to do over here or back home, was I got to work on a dairy farm. I milked cows for 3 months.
Wow.
Like that was and talking about transferable skills, like that, getting up at 5:30, like to do training at 5 a.m, like 3 times a week. Well, you have to get up. Like I was work at 3:45 every, like, because cows need milking in the morning. So that whole like getting up early like came back into play, which is something I never thought would be a thing, but there you go.
Wow.
But yeah, so while I was doing the traveling, it got me thinking, like, I don't know if you've ever done any traveling, staying in hostels and stuff, but you're meeting people from around the world all the time, new people all the time, and you're having the same conversations all the time. What's your name, where'd you come from, what you doing, blah blah blah. And I ended up, along the line, I realized I was telling the same stories to people, and the stories are really always related to my time in swimming. They're always sports stories. Okay. And it suddenly realized that I, like, for the last however long it had been since I stopped, I just like totally ignored this huge part of me that there's a part of me that I loved, and I needed that to be a part of me going forward. And it kind of triggered a period of reflection where I realized that a lot of the things that had happened to me in those years were because I hadn't processed the stuff that had gone on, and like that was why, one of the reasons why the whole depression thing happened. And it got me thinking that apart from the odd like top elite athlete, or maybe the odd one that ends up committing suicide because of the mental health issues, not many people are talking about that side of sport, and the challenges and the struggles and everything that goes on once you leave sport. Everyone just thinks, oh, it's hunky-dory, you find a job, you start a business, whatever. That's not the truth. And I decided that I needed to, I needed to, and I wanted to change that conversation, open it up, talk about that. And that's kind of where the idea of my podcast came along. Okay. But at the time, like, I was also dabbling in all different types of like making money online. So I figured I'd come across the fact that you could do this, and I was like, well, this is cool. All I need is a laptop and the internet, and I can work from wherever, and I can travel the world. So I was like, oh yeah, I'll do that. So I tried like blogging and like a bit of photography and a few other things, and nothing really was working. So I decided to use the opportunity, and I realized that actually a lot of athletes go and start their own businesses. And as I looked more into it, I was like, well, a lot of the skills and the talents and attributes that make you an elite athlete, make you successful at being an athlete, actually really make you great at being a successful business owner. Whether it's from your resilience, your your time management, your focus, you're driven, you have that passion, you know, all those different things, and your mindset and all those things are needed by both. So there's that kind of marrying of the two, and that's where the concept of the show came from. And off the back of that, I've started helping people like use the skills that I've picked up along my different road, and to help them start their businesses, grow their businesses, whether that's through coaching or whether that's through helping them build out sales funnels or then the marketing side of things. Because I think that's one of the things that a lot of athletes or a lot of businesses in general struggle with is like, yeah, I've got this brilliant idea, it's awesome, I'm going to build it and they will come. And that's not how it works. You have to like get it out there, you have to market, you have to tell your story. And the podcast allows me to let people do that, and so it kind of all marries together. So
that's massive. And in terms of what you said about people having an idea and then it's always straight to how can I make money out of this, and sometimes that's where the pitfalls start, because for me, I always think there needs to be a why. So what's the reason for you doing it? And if you're providing a service, then naturally it's easier to monetize. It doesn't mean it's going to happen. There's no kind of time scales that you can put on it, essentially, but there's always got to be a why. So for me, like doing something like this is to meet obviously people like yourself, tell your story, and as I mentioned, again, the main focus is to show people that sports people do have transferable skills. So that's my why. Anything else that comes off the back of it, that's a bonus, good, bad, or indifferent. But it's something that since probably retiring from professional football, it's probably one of the most things that I've like felt most passionate about, to the point where I was kind of thinking about it and I was thinking, well, is it going to work? And I was thinking, well, there was nothing that was telling me that it's not going to work. Like things I've come up with in the past, there's always one or two things I think, nah, if this happens, then it's not going to work. And then I think, oh, let me just try it anyway. And again, it's trial and error. But with this, it's like, I haven't got anything to lose because there's no boundaries. The ball's in your court or anyone that I speak to. And it's up to them to say, like, tell their story. But the backstory of it's going to be, this person has transferable skills. They used to be a sports person and now they're doing this. And that's kind of it, really.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And it's these kind of conversations, and I've been on a couple of similar kind of podcasts and whatever that are doing you know, kind of the similar types of things. And it's the same process. I've always said, like, if these things were here, you know, 10 years ago, back when I was kind of finishing up my sport, then it would have been so helpful to kind of have an idea what to expect. And for me, it was always like, oh, because I never made it to the top, I was never like part of the GB team or the England team or that kind of thing, then maybe I didn't get the support because I wasn't at the top. Maybe the people at the top do get the support, and maybe they do, maybe they don't.
Well, naturally, they would do, yeah.
But for me, it was for all those many, you know, millions of athletes out there that don't make it to the top, because there's only a select few that do, that you know, probably need that help, and that was kind of a big thing for me. And then just to like literally like touch on some of like what I've figured my transferable skills have been is a lot of it's been my mentality and like my drive and my resilience to not give up. Like there's so many times during my PhD where I could have just like packed it in, and I didn't. There, you know, that goal drivenness, like that's something that I think a lot of athletes are. They like the goals, but I think the big thing with goals is you need to know like you said, the why behind the goals. Why is that goal? Why do you want to lose the weight? Why do you want to do this job? You know, just because you've got, for example, like I was always told that I'd make a really good like doctor, like not a PhD doctor, like a proper medical doctor. And I've got the knowledge and the skills to go and study for that. But I didn't have the why. I didn't want to do it. It wasn't like that why. Whereas like the research side of things, like I'm a voracious, I love to learn. Like ask me to, like, I'm always learning something. And that's a big why for me. So I definitely get, for me, and then when it comes down to like the whole for me, whether it's business, whether you're finding a job or anything, there's two big W's: is why do you want to do this, and the other big thing is like, for me, everyone asks you the question, what do you want to do now that you've not done sport? And I think that's the wrong question to ask. For me, you should be asking, who do you want to serve?
Yeah, good point.
And whether it's a job, whether it's a business, whatever, you need to be at that for me, that's a better question to be asking. Who do you want to serve? Do you want to serve, people who are sick and ill and care for them? And, maybe you want to be a doctor or a nurse. Do you want to serve younger athletes and bring your knowledge from the game and help them improve and get the skills that you have? And then maybe you want to be a coach. And all those kind of things. Or maybe you want to help people fix their IT problems and you want to, work in IT. So, that for me is a better question. And just it's just a little pet peeve of mine, I guess.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you make a good point, because I always say sometimes retirement in sport it can be seen as a negative. And sometimes I think the reasons for that is how it's portrayed or how someone approaches it. So it may not be the sports person or the athlete that has the wrong approach. It could be someone external, and they say, oh, like you said, what are you going to do now? And it's like, well, and then where do you go from there? Because straight away it sounds like a negative question. Whereas if you say, well, who do you want to serve now, or how do you want to help people now? It straight away there's a different take on that question.
Yeah. So
the answer is going to be more positive, rather than, oh, well, you did this, so what are you going to do now? As if to say, well, you haven't got the skills to do anything else. So sometimes I think the approach from an external source can kind of hinder or better your outlook on what to do afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about that perception, and I think a lot of the times as an athlete, you kind of do have the ability to change that perception. For example, like if you play like football or whatever, you're looking for the spaces rather than the players to send that ball to. And it's whereas like most people would look for they'd see the players there rather than the space. So
that's it. Yeah. So in terms of your podcast, what's the name of it?
Yeah, so the show's called Beyond the Finish Line, and you can find it pretty much wherever you've listened to the podcast. I think it's pretty much wherever. It's on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, like all those places. Okay, brilliant. Well, I mean, last but not least, just like thanks for your time. Obviously appreciate listening to your story. I hope it resonates with some of my listeners going forward. As you know, I've just started this, so I'm new to all of this. I'm new to Instagram, new to Zoom, new to obviously interviewing people. But for me, the main thing is obviously just adapting to the situation that we're in and making the most of it. But yeah, I mean, hopefully we'll keep in touch going forward. And like I said, good luck with everything that you choose to do going forward in your life. Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. I always love sharing my story. It's nice to be on the other side of the mic sometimes, for sure. Yeah, no problem. Well, stay safe, and like I said, thank you for your time. Thank you. No worries. I'll see you soon. No problem. Thank you. Thanks. Bye.